Hello, and welcome back to Jeff's Giant Growing Journal. I decided to do a video to kind of summarize my last year's grow. It's actually February 10th of 2022, and I decided to talk about what happened last year. At the end of the year, I don't believe I ever did a final video, a wrap-up video, so to speak. I also put it out on Facebook to ask you guys what kind of questions you wanted answered from my grow from last year. So to summarize from last year, my squash lady ended up at a total weight of 1620.5, and it was a new state record for about 10 minutes because Todd and Donna Skinner ended up weighing a 2164 squash at the same weigh off, and they set a new world record with it. So I guess if I'm going to get beat, I guess that's a good way to get beat. My pumpkin, Lucy, I actually ended up taking her to Barnesville, and she weighed in at 2195, which is a new state record. And fittingly, since Todd and Donna took my squash record away from me, I actually took their pumpkin record away from them. So next year, I'm sure we're both going to be going after that same both records, just to kind of up it and make it more difficult for the other one. But it's all in good fun, and we'll have a good time and do our best to beat each other. So, I'm going to try and make this video as short as I can. It's probably going to be longer than I'm thinking, but I don't want to get it too long because I'm kind of afraid if I make it too long, you're not going to want to watch it, you're not going to want to listen to it. So I'll do the best that I can, but I can't promise anything. So some of the questions that I got was, when do I start seeds? My seed starting has been for years, April 15th. I file them down and put them in a starter mix, and then shortly after that, once they pop up and once I know which way they're going to grow, then I will put them out into hoop houses out in the garden. That's usually not until by the time I can actually get in there and get everything done and know which way they're going. It's usually probably the middle of May, beginning maybe first couple weeks of May, by the time I actually get out there and get that taken care of and able to get into the garden and do what I got to do. The cover for the young plant, as I said, I do a hoop house. Essentially what it is a 6x6 plastic hoop house. I use rebar. I stick rebar down in the ground and put 1/2-inch conduit over top of that to create a loop, and then I cover that with plastic, and the edges of the plastic are actually buried in dirt to stop any wind from picking that plastic. So I do that for the young plants. I do use soil heating cables. I also, when it's cold, when we first go out there, I do something that Ron Wallace does, which is he takes a piece of fencing, a small piece of fencing, and puts over top of the plants with a heat lamp in there at night, and then that piece of fencing and the heat lamp gets covered up with a sheet. And that is enough heat to keep them from getting damaged from the frost or anything like that, from the cold overnight. The vine pattern. Vine pattern that I use is a Christmas tree. The past couple of years, what I have done is from the back edge of my patch, I go out usually 4 or 5 feet, and that's where I put my plants. And then I typically will cut off the first 2 secondaries, and then the very next 2 secondaries, those secondaries go straight out, and then the tertiaries that come off the back of those, I allow them to grow to the back of the patch. I've done that the past at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, and I'll put a picture up here of what I'm talking about with that. In the future, this year, I'm actually going to kind of flip that around and I'm going to pull my plant back further. I'll still be cutting off the first two secondaries, and the biggest reason for that is that helps to prevent any pressure right at the stump and to stop a foaming stump from happening. But what I'll do is I will actually grow my plant still in a Christmas tree pattern, but as it grows out, the very last secondaries, I will cut those off at 15 feet. My patches are 30 feet wide, and then the tertiaries on those will grow forward in front of the pumpkin. And that's my plan for this year. I believe they call that a pitchfork pattern. So kind of looks like a pitchfork when it's done because it's going out, pointing out towards just like a pitchfork does. But the main vine I let grow. It just goes, and wherever it goes, it goes. I cut off all the secondaries from it, but I let it continue to go. I might snake it around just to get it around different things, but it just goes, and however far it goes, it goes. Now I have had some that the main vine broke off. Actually, this year on my squash, that actually happened. I was moving it, and it must have, I don't remember if it was a cold morning or something like that, but I ended up breaking the main vine off. And it wasn't something I was too concerned about. There's a lot of growers that actually cut the main vine off right at the fruit. So I just let it go and did my thing with it, and wasn't too concerned about it. Distance from the stump. I don't really go within actual distance anymore. I used to say, well, I can't pollinate before 10 feet. It's got to be 10 feet out. I'm not even going to think about a female before then. I've since changed my thinking, and if my plant is going to wind up being 1,000 square feet, which typically they are, then I want my plant to be 350 to 400 square feet before I pollinate. Get that bigger plant size will help push that pumpkin faster, sooner. So that's what I do now. I don't worry about distance as much as I worry about the actual plant size. And then this year I actually did count the secondaries behind the fruit. And on my 1620 squash, there were 20 secondaries behind the fruit. And on the 2195, there was 18 secondaries behind the fruit. I don't typically do that, so I can't tell you what it was in years past. But like I said, I worry about the square footage of plant at pollination and not so much how far out it is. What do I put under the pumpkin? Well, what I put under the pumpkin is this right here. This one here is 1 inch thick. It's just a styrofoam. It's a solid styrofoam. What I use under the pumpkins is 2 inches thick, and I poke holes in it, 1/4 inch holes, poke holes, drill holes, whatever. I get holes in it, and I put that down. I put a thin layer of play sand on it, and that's what I grow the pumpkin on. I actually do have some mill cloth. This past year would have been the first year I could have used it, because I bought it last fall, in the fall of 2020, and I could have used it in 2021, but typically you put it on plywood, and in the spring of 2021 plywood was $100 a sheet, and I was not spending $100 to put in underneath of a pumpkin. So I used the foam, which I'd used in the past with success. Next year I will probably still use the foam, but I will add the mill cloth on top of the foam. Still poke holes in it. I may or may not use the sand. The mill cloth will help as far as not allowing mice to chew up through it, and also make it easier to pull the fruit forward if I do need to. How do I fertilize after pollination? I don't do anything really any different before pollination compared to after pollination. I did add a little bit of potassium this year, and judging from my tissue tests, I did 2 or 3 tissue tests after pollination, and I need to add more potassium. My watering system, I watered about 120 gallons a day at peak. I use drip tape. I have 10 water totes that I collect water off of my pole barn roof, and I use a shallow well pump to pump it into through my drip tape. I've actually got a video showing that. I'll link that back in the description so those who want to see it, make it easy for you to find it. It highlights and shows you exactly how my whole watering system works. Next questions I had was, what did I do right and what did I do wrong? What I did wrong, I thought about both these questions, and I couldn't really truly come up with anything really good. At least that I felt was good. The obvious to some of you, I'm sure some of you will laugh at this, but the 1620, the squash, if you looked at other videos or pictures that I posted online, you would notice one thing in the squash patch. There was a lot of weeds. That's what I did wrong. In that squash patch, I had weeds like you wouldn't believe, and I just couldn't keep up with them. In the pumpkin patch, I did not have weeds, and that's what I did right. There was no weeds there, or there were very little compared to that squash patch. The other thing was, I tell anybody, a lot of new growers that are asking questions, how can you get it that big? Well, to get a 1,000-pound pumpkin, I'm going to tell you it's easy. It's not, but it is with today's genetics, and if you can keep the plant disease-free and insect-free, you've got a really good chance of hitting 1,000 pounds. And the amount of disease and pests, bugs that I had in my patch was very minimal. I was actually pleasantly surprised at how few cucumber beetles I had, squash bugs. I don't believe I even saw a squash vine borer this year. I usually see 1 or 2. I'm sure that they were there, but it's not something that I saw. And powdery mildew, I bet you I had 5 or 6 leaves, probably on both plants that had it, and that was it. Normally by the middle end of September, I probably half my plants covered in powdery mildew. And what I attribute that to, in all honesty, is my birthday present was an SR 200. It's a steel Mr. Blower, and you can just, it's a backpack sprayer, backpack blower. That is what allowed me to spray and get good coverage with all of my insecticide, fungicide, and I think that's really what the difference maker in having my plants be so powdery mildew free and really even pest free. How do I go heavy? I've been asked this question a lot. I had a theory, and I got a bunch of data and put it on a chart, and I went, nope, that's not right. So how do I go heavy? My honest answer, I ain't got a clue. I don't know what it is for sure. I don't think there's anybody out there that does. If I ever figure it out, you guys will know, because I'll be 40% heavy at the scale every time. I don't believe that there's one answer to it. I think genetics has something to do with it. I think the amount of sun that your patch gets has something to do with it. seeds that they grow every year, and every year they are two chart or even light two chart, and they don't get the sun that I get, and I believe that the sun has something to do with it. But I also believe it's genetic, because I've got another friend that went 7%. I think it was 7% heavy on one pumpkin this year, and 22% heavy on another pumpkin. Same grower, same patch, both pumpkins. So what's the difference there? The only difference there is going to be genetics. So there may be a few small little things between the patches, but if they're right next to each other, they're very, very minimal. So that's going to me, is going to come down to the genetics of the seed. Does that mean you need to pick a seed that goes heavy? Maybe. Sometimes it's not the seed that goes heavy. Sometimes it's the pollinator. I believe it's the 1625 Gantner, the old one. I believe Gantner grew another 1625 this year as well. But the older one tended to go make the seeds go heavy the next year. Sometimes it's not necessarily the actual fruit that is being weighed that matters, but it's the pollinator of that one. Which brings me to, somebody asked how do I pick my seeds. Percent heavy does play a part in my decision, and I look at, if it's a brand new seed, then I will look at the parents, see what the parents have done. Like one seed, an example is the 2201 Wallace. He grew it in 2021, so nobody has grown it yet. It went 17% heavy. Doesn't really mean much. It might mean something because it did go 17% heavy, but then I'll look at the parents and see what they do. What did the mother of the 2201 do? And I'll be honest with you, off the top of my head, I can't remember what the mother was. The pollinator was, I believe it was a 2294 Knoll. And what did that one do? And if you go into Pumpkin Fanatic and you look at the genetics and look at the progeny of it, I believe the very top one that you're going to see on the 2294 Knoll is a 2376 Bike. So it's definitely got potential to go big, and it's going big in Kentucky, in the South. So that 2294 would be a very good seed, in my opinion. The 2201, I wouldn't hesitate to grow it. I actually bought a couple at auction because I figured this year they're cheap, next year they're not going to be nearly as cheap. But what am I growing this coming year? This year I am growing my 2195. I'm also growing my 1699. My 1699 I think has huge potential, but just did not see enough dirt this past year, and so I want to grow it and prove it myself. I believe that it will go heavy. Now I did cross my the pollinator for my 2195 is my 1699, and I fully believe that the 2195 is going to go heavy as well. The 2195 itself went 15% heavy. So I am growing both of those, the 2195 and the 1699. I am also growing the 1109 Jutras. The 1109 Jutras was a squash that Joe Jutras grew in 150 square feet, and it actually grew two monsters this year. It grew the 2164 Skinner. It also grew the 2030 Tobac. So it is proven, and it will definitely go big. We know that. As growers, we know that it will go big. Will I be able to get it there? I don't know. I'll tell you at the end of next year. Those are the three main ones that I'm growing. I'm actually also growing a 150 square foot plant I'm going to grow my 463.5 squash as well. That's the seed that grew my 1620. And I'd like to actually cross that into the 1109. That's the main reason I'm even going to grow it. And I've never grown a 150 square foot plant before. There's actually a competition on big pumpkins to grow the biggest fruit in 150 square feet. And so I'm going to enter that competition and see what I can do. I believe the world record is, I don't know if it's over 1,200 pounds yet or not, but I'm going to see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. This past year, I grew the 2195 that the seed I grew that off of was a 1747.5 handy. And the reason I picked that seed was because Steve Handy contacted me back in, I believe it was December of 2020. And he said, this is the way we used to do it back in the quote unquote old days, before the advent of the internet and Facebook and being able to get a hold of and find people. You would contact them, call them, email, write them, and say, hey, do you want to trade seeds? So he emailed me and he asked, do you want to trade seeds? And I said, sure, why not? So, because he liked my 1699 that went 22% heavy. So he said that we've always just crossed heavy with heavy and it's always worked out well for us. So I would like to grow your 1699 and cross it with my 1747 or my 1498, possibly both. The 1498 was growing off of his 1747 and it went 23% heavy. I said, well, that's good enough for me to grow the 1747. So I grew that one. Unfortunately, Steve ended up with cancer and passed away. I believe it was in June of 2021. I grew out. I did the best that I could with that seed and pushed it as much as I felt like I could. I kept in contact with his wife just to let her know what it was doing and how it was doing. And now I know that his club out in Washington is actually doing a competition using that seed. So I'm glad I was able to prove it and or help prove it, because he actually proved it to me, and I just helped get it out there a little bit more, growing the 2195. This past year, that as I said, my 1620 was growing off of my 463.5 squash, and I wanted to grow that to basically prove a point. Look at the genetics, look at the parents, the grandparents of the seed. Don't necessarily look at the weight. That weight of that 463 was only 463 pounds. But why was it 463 pounds? You don't know. I do. And the reason it was honestly, it was grower error. It was my second year growing, and I ended up killing all of the vine tips on that plant. Actually, I killed the vine tips on all my plants that year, but it was a 250 square foot plant, and it was my second year growing. So I didn't know everything that I know at this point, and I knew that seed had pretty good potential, and it grew a 1620.5 squash, which was number 4 in the world this year. It will grow big, and I believe it will even grow bigger than that, especially if I could get rid of the weeds in the patch. So that's why I chose those seeds last year. This year, my 2195, there's a number of growers that are going to be growing it. So I told you a little bit about my plans for 2022. Some of the things that I've done so far is I have put down on one patch, I put down a couple bales of straw, and I turned every patch over. I took an excavator and basically dug down about 18 to 24 inches and dug and flipped it over and left it for the winter. I'll get it all tilled up, get it tilled in here in the next couple months, and get a soil test done, and then I'll add my amendments based on that soil test. Another thing that I'm doing, I'm making my wife a little happier. I'm bringing my seed starting from our dining room downstairs to our basement, which is where I'm at now. You can see behind me here I have it's a work in progress. It's not done yet. I still got a little bit of work to do, but what I'm calling the Monsters Pumpkin Maker 3000. That's where I'll start my seeds. There's a grow lights up there, and then that's just the insulation. This insulation that I showed you, that's all that I've got there. And so I've got that to start my seeds in, and I'm sure it will make my wife happy for me to get it downstairs out of the dining room. So I've kind of got my own little cave back here. I can't really call it a man cave because we got everything down here in the basement now. So, yeah, those are my plans. We'll see what happens. We'll see what the future brings. You know, I make my own plans, and I made plans a few years ago when I grew in 2020 when I grew my 1423 squash, the state record in squash. At the beginning of that year, my plan was to grow the state record squash. And then the following year, which would have been 2021, to go for my jacket. And then, so in the fall of 2020, after I weighed my 1699, I realized I had already got the state record squash. And I weighed the 1699, that went 22% heavy. I realized at that point my jacket was within sight, and was fairly certain I had it, and I did. I got 4,000 pounds total weight with 3 fruit to 3 different weigh-offs, even though it was the year of COVID, and they did change the rules to accommodate that because there was a lot of weigh-offs that were canceled. I did go to 3 different weigh-offs, and I earned my jacket. Because of COVID, I have not got that yet. I'll actually get that here at the end of March. But so my plan was not to get my jacket in 2020. My plan was to get my jacket in 2021. The Lord says I can one up you, and you're going to get your jacket in 2020. And so the Lord blessed me and got me my jacket in 2020. I actually rested a patch for 2021. And again, my plan was to rest that patch and go for the state record in 2022. Do some things a little bit different, and just learn a little bit more in 2021, and just do the best that I could, but not really expecting to get the state record pumpkin. And again, the Lord said, I will one up you, and I will give you that state record. So the Lord blessed me again, and gave me that state record. Will He bless me in 2022? I don't know. That's not up to me. That's up to the good man above. And we'll see what happens. I will do my best and put the time in that I need to, put the time in that life allows, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to have fun with it and just grow big. So thanks for watching. If you have any more questions, please comment. I will do my best to answer everything. You can reach out through email, through text, through my Facebook Messenger. However, I will help you. I will see what I can come up with to answer all your questions. I don't know everything, but I know enough to get me by. So God bless.